In this lesson, we're going to be talking about preparing for an investigation. The first thing that you want to make sure that you understand as you're preparing for an investigation is you want to make sure you understand the scope of the investigation. So the scope of the investigation has to do with what elements are in play, what pieces of evidence are you going to be looking for, what is going to end up helping the case to get to a point where you understand better what has happened and what's going to move the case forward towards understanding the truth of what happened. So in understanding the scope of the investigation, you will get what evidence you need to acquire and what evidence do you have the authority to acquire. There are cases where you may find information that you don't actually have the authority to acquire and obtain. And so understanding the scope of the investigation is really important so that you know what evidence you have the authority to acquire. The type of the investigation. After you've gotten the scope under control, you need to understand the type of investigation that you're going to be doing. Are you going to need to do a live acquisition? In other words, do you need what's in memory on a particular system or device? Do you need to know what the network state is? Do you need to know network information that's coming into the particular system or device that you are investigating? Do you need to know systems that are connected to that device at the network layer? If you need all of that sort of thing, then you need to do live acquisition. So you need to acquire the target while it's up and running. If all you need is access to files or programs that are installed and see what activity has gone on from a historical basis, you can do a static acquisition. So the type of investigation is important so you can determine whether you need that system up and running so you can do a live acquisition, or you can just live with the hard drives and other storage devices. So you could do a static acquisition. You'll need to make sure that you've got evidence storage in place. Do you have a place where you can store disk drives, USB sticks, or maybe a PC? Do you have a place where you can store those securely so they are locked away and nobody else has access to them? Do you have a place where you can store digital artifacts, where you can store image files, for example? You need a place to store that evidence so that it can't be tampered with. So you need both the ability to store hardware evidence or physical evidence, and you also need a place where you can store digital evidence. Both of these are really important because you may have pieces of evidence that are either hardware or a digital artifact of some sort or another, whether it's an image or a set of files or something along those lines. So you need to have a place where you can store these different types of evidence in a secure fashion. Along those lines, you need to make sure that you understand what the documentation is going to look like. You need to have a chain of evidence. You need to have evidence verification data for where you do have digital pieces of evidence. So you need to have hash values. Ultimately, you need to be able to both control and document everything that has gone on with the evidence that you have acquired from the point that you acquire it to the point that you hand it off or present testimony for the evidence. So in conclusion, you need to know what the scope of the investigation is. You need to know what type of investigation you're going to be doing. So you can't have somebody just show up with a PC and hand it to you and expect you to do a static acquisition if the evidence that you require for the case really needs a live acquisition. You need to make sure that you've got storage for the types of evidence that you are going to be acquiring. And finally, you have to make sure that you've got the right documentation trails in place and the right documentation so that you can prove that the evidence that you have has been under your control the entire time, has not been altered, and has not been tampered with at all.